Hi everybody, this is Ryan from PerformaBuilt, and we're going to continue our journey down the diagnosis road. And I promise you it's going to be really simple. And today we're going to talk about lockup, okay, in an overdrive transmission. Something that a lot of people don't understand, but it's very simple. And today I'm going to talk about every damn thing you'd ever want to know about it, especially in the 4L60 and 4L80 today. For starters, I'm going to talk about the vehicle, and then we're going to move on to some of the harder stuff in the transmission that's extreme to repair. But the good news is, if you're watching this video, chances are to fix lockup 75% of the time. You may never need to even pull the transmission. Most of it can be done in the vehicle. So for the guys that have ever run into the P1870 or the P0741, etc. You might throw a bunch of P074 codes if you have a lockup problem. And what that is your computer is detecting a variance in speed and all kinds of things that the transmission sees, and it's saying, okay, there's something wrong. And you'll probably feel lockup slipping. You won't notice a big RPM drop when you actually go into lockup on the highway or things like that. Some other symptoms, your transmission will probably see a lot of excessive heat. It may buck in and out, or lockup could be stuck on and it may just stall the vehicle altogether. So let's talk about all the reasons why. One of the biggest culprits, I think, is people, vehicle-wise, what we're talking about, is not plugging in their harness correctly or all the way and pushing it down into the pan. Okay, and as you can see, the O-rings holds this on, and these 4 little clips help, but you still have to be very gentle and use something in the slot. The pin, is rubberized like any other car connector, and it can get cocked, and the pins are pretty long. Some of them might make contact, some might not. The other one would be more so a wiring issue, and when I say that, I know that sounds very broad, but it's actually quite simple. So your vehicle harness that connects to this one is going to have a black and a tan wire. That is lockup. The actual pin number, I don't remember off the top of my head. I never used it, but you can get on Google and find out. They're readily available. The black and tan wire is what you want to tap into. And that brings us to this solenoid. Okay, this is probably the one everybody's familiar with. It's a TCC apply solenoid that plugs into the pump and works the TCC apply valve. This is the guy that goes bad more often than not, and this is going to be your main subject when you have a lockup failure. We all know electronics can be finicky sometimes. They do break. Shit just happens, and it's the world of electronics. There's very easy things to repair this with. There's many solenoids available. Fits-all makes one. I've never seen them fail. You clip and snip a simple positive and negative, wire tie it up, and plug it in, and you should be good to go if this is your symptom. How this works and how you can tell is this solenoid, despite everybody's belief, actually works off of a ground. So to apply the lockup clutch, it grounds itself out. When it's off, it will have 12 volts of positive power, and that's usually run to your brake switch, and your brake switch is usually run elsewhere depending on the vehicle you got. Now, one of the things that can cause this to act up is a misadjusted brake switch. If it's a little off, it may not be applying and de-applying correctly at different speeds compared to what you're set at, and it will just be off in general. Sometimes it could buck, sometimes it could be stuck on. It depends which way that switch is screwed in on your pedal. The other thing is just overall grounds in your car, main grounds, all that. If your main grounds are not hooked up, have good connection, or anything like that, you may not have lockup. Main grounds are extremely important for every aspect of your vehicle, not just this. If you are reading, and you can read it through the wires at the solenoid, through the connector itself, if you're reading 12 volts, your solenoid's off. If it's grounding, your solenoid's on. And quite simply, my advice in that is, either problem you have, stuck on or stuck off, you will have to go back and just trace those wires right up to your PCM, and you may have to get in there and actually see if it's being commanded, what it's doing, things like that to help you out along the way. but there's not a lot of wiring involved, so don't be too scared. Now, as far as the rest of the vehicle goes, some other things that are very uncommon can affect it, much like if there's a discrepancy between the output speed sensor and what everything else is doing. You may go into limp mode, or you may just not have lockup, either one or both of those conditions. The other thing is erratic TPS, random misfires will cause it to kick in and out, things like that. So if your engine's not running properly, your map's dirty, your TPS is wonky, or you just got misfires everywhere, those are things that need addressed. And the O2 sensors actually play a big part in lockup as well. So as far as a vehicle goes, it's very simple. If your lockup is kicking up in and out, it's usually set at 45 miles an hour in a factory tune, and you're driving 45 miles an hour and it's just in and out all the time, that is a very simple fix. There's probably nothing wrong, and all you need to do is go into tuning and raise your mile an hour up or down depending on what you want and the driving conditions you see every day. So that covers the vehicle. Now we're going to talk about a little more advanced stuff. We're going to go into the transmission, and I got several good examples for you guys, everything you'd ever want to know. First time I'm ever going to dive this deep for y'all. The part besides the tranny that could be wrong, or something wrong with it, would be the torque converter itself or the lockup clutch in it. Now, we all remember this from a couple other videos I have, my hacked apart Corvette torque converter. But if this is burnt in any way, or the transmission is causing it to slip, or the converter isn't built right, and it's either sandwiched too tight, too loose, there are many things that could go wrong with this. Or your stamped steel backing's warped. If any of these conditions are met, there's nothing you can really do. If you catch it early, your transmission's probably going to be fine. The builder usually can tell by a simple screen in the pump if your converter has put any debris into the transmission. So maybe you get lucky. Maybe all you need is to get the converter out, sent off, cut and cleaned, and your lockup problem should be fixed. At that point, we just go over the vehicle, address anything, make sure it's all working properly, because sometimes mechanical pieces go down too. Shit just happens. I know a couple years ago, there was bad bonding on these. Nobody's fault, manufacturer takes care of it, everybody's happy. That's just racing. So, now we got the vehicle and the torque converter aside. Those things are fairly simple to diagnose, and also if your torque converter is going real bad and you don't catch it early, you're going to have more black stuff in that pan than a transmission ever could put out. Most builders use a mix of clutches, so not everything's going to be carbon. Lockup clutches usually are always carbon, except straight OEM. So you'll see a ton of black, and that is a clear, dead sign your converter needs repaired. Now, we'll start with the transmission, lastly. And we're going to go front to back, starting at the very tip of it, at the input shaft. This circuit is very simple. There's not a lot to it. But there's a lot of tiny little nuances, and it's so small, that's what makes it sensitive, and a lot of people are afraid of it. But when these conditions are met, everything's working, there's no reason to be scared, and often, like I said before, it can be fixed in the vehicle. So, primary players in the PWM TCC circuit are a little section of the valve body and a little section in the pump, a couple valves, and this little bit of the input shaft and stator. So, starting at the tip, one of the biggest common mistakes I see is when people install their torque converter, which a lot of people struggle with, and I'm not knocking you for it. If you have a fresh converter and a fresh transmission, it's going to be a little tight and a little hard to get in there. Guys who do it every day like me, my tip to you is, for a beginner, put your palm on the top of the torque converter as it's sitting on the shafts and rock and push back and forth. The theory behind this, the converter likes to sag. It's not really centered yet. Using that upward motion back and forth should get it in fairly easily. My advice to you. Now, the last click that you'll ever hear is the O-ring squeezing into the very bottom of the converter, which in this case it's a little plastic majiggy on an OEM converter. But billet ones, it'll squeeze into something steel because they're just made better. Now, that is a big part of lockup. If you clip this O-ring and you're not careful enough, you will probably not have lockup, or at least partial lockup. Now, the other thing people don't think about, and why I was so anal about bushings and everybody made fun of me for it, remember that? Well, guess what? If you don't do, or your builders does not do this bushing here, lockup feed, part of it is through here, through the tip of this shaft, and out here, okay? This hole to this hole, pretty simple. Your bushing ride's here on this journal. If that bushing's worn out, you are gonna have a massive lockup leak, and you're probably only gonna have partial lockup. It will virtually do the same thing as clipping your O-ring. And you know, this is a junk thing I use for example, but it's too bad you can't really see it. But there's a decent amount of click-clack back and forth on this bushing, on my little piece of junk here. Naturally, we would replace that, no more problems, but that is a very uncommon one you can watch out for. And you should be able to inspect with the transmission out of the vehicle. Now, moving on, I think we're going to talk about the small section in the valve body. So here we have a valve body, and I know everybody's not used to looking at this side, so I'm going to flip it over. But we're going to look at this valve. Okay, so if you had the valve body off, this valve here, it's PWM, okay? Most builders set it to on and off. Quite simply, you would stick the valve. What that means is the back of the valve should be at the back. The middle should be locked down, and the front of the valve should be up front so it can't move. That's on and off PWM. It's a very common mod, everybody knows about it, and it's a good thing to do. Because why this is important, GM's pulse method, where it would just rattle back and forth, would sand down this aluminum, thereby causing a leak, an oblong bore causing a leak. Now there's several ways to remedy this as a builder or at home. There's several products like Fits-All that have a solid steel valve with O-rings around it. Can't possibly leak, can't possibly move. Sonax Transgo, I have a couple of those here today. Sonax makes a valve like this, and Transgo makes a valve like this. I don't really care for either of these. I would never use them myself because I have better ways to do it. But if you're an at-home kind of person and this is what's available, it actually, chances are, might fix your problem. I truly recommend the Fits-All valve though, because it's not even really a valve. The other thing you can do is buy some O-ring caps. There's potential that this cap leaks. A quick fix to get you back home would be push the cap farther in and put another clip in it. It'll keep it farther. It may get you home. It may save you a towing bill. Just a simple tip from me to you. But if your plug's leaking, replace it with a new one or an O-ring one. Just another failure point there. Now I'll show you for the guys looking under the car. It's going to be this right here. And a big question is why, a lot of people have asked me why we put the clip on the outside of here instead of the factory way on the inside. It's really a courtesy to you. I naturally don't really want you in my transmission, but if I can save you the aggravation from pulling it and you have a lockup problem here for some reason 10 years down the road, I can just have you yank it out, no need to pull the valve body, and we can do whatever we need to do to the valve and keep you going. That's why we do it. A lot of people argue with us that, you know, it actually caused the transmission to fail, and putting a clip upside down is the stupidest thing I ever heard of. But hey, that's the world we live in today. So I'm always thinking of everybody on the most common things, and we kind of make this serviceable at home. Granted, you work with me and go through some diagnostics. So that valve and the valve body is what you're going to pay attention to. And for the guys, I forgot, this is an LS lockup O-ring. You know, this is, oh, there goes that. This is a 298 millimeter, small blocks, big blocks, older style stuff, 700 R4. The LS, just imagine that nipple cut off and an O-ring right below it. And so virtually the same method, you know, nothing has changed even though the visuals are different. Before we move on to the 60 pump, for these 4L80 guys, You have it even simpler than the 60. The pumps typically don't have problems. You may experience some vehicle problems, in which case they're virtually the same as I have just described. However, your valve body is a little different. And this is a crappy 80 valve body I just pulled out of a core. But if you were under the vehicle, you're going to be looking at this valve here. Okay? And GM did a really nice thing for you guys. They actually put the clip so you could access it, because we all know lockup is a sensitive system and a problem. You would pull this solenoid out, get a pair of needle nose pliers, very tiny, pop the roll pin, and if you were desperate, you could actually drill a hole right here. It wouldn't even hurt a thing. You could pop the roll pin out from the bottom. And right here is your problem child. This is where the valve is. And on the 4L80, it's a steel valve. Steel and aluminum don't like each other very much, especially when they're pulsing. The valve's so heavy, it sands it. Very common problem for the 4L80. The only fix I'm aware of, we cut our own valves here, but this is for you do-it-yourselfers. So Sonax makes this kit. It's a valve with a scarf cut O-ring around it, and it has fixed every single lockup problem I've ever known with the 4L80. It's almost a crucial mod when you're building a 4L80, or even if you got a junkyard one that you just want it to last a while. Good mod to do. So that number is 34994-01K TCC regulator valve kit. One of the first things you should do for the 4L80. Now, back to the 60. We're going to move on to the pump. Another thing you can adjust in your vehicle. So, the last thing that we would ever want to tackle, but you should be able to fix it in your car. If for some reason you can't, then it's just destined to be pulled out and repaired. This TCC apply solenoid plugs into a hole in the pump here. Now, this hole can be accessed by snap ring pliers, you know, pretty much any minor snap ring plier. These are snap-on ones. And it is a little bit of a bitch. But it's that snap ring and valve right there, okay? If you undo the gray solenoid here, your TCC apply, and the two 10mm bolts, you can access this bore. Now it is adjacent from the boost valve, okay? You don't want to pull that out. This is the boost valve. It's covered up on this model by a 4L70 speed sensor. And, you know, we're just going to put that back so I don't forget. So this is the valve you want to focus on, the tinier one, okay? Now, just go in, pull that out with snap ring pliers, and fish the valve out. You know, patience is required for that. And the valve that you're going to pull out is going to be one of these two usually, for the 4L60 anyway. The 700 and the very early 60s will be steel. It'll look slightly different. This is a earlier model on my left. This is probably the most common one. You'll have two springs, and you want to pull it out and put it back in this orientation. We just want to inspect it for now. That's all we're talking about is the valves. This is a later style, and in the 4L70s, 09 through 13s, it has a single spring that fits in this cup. Now, if you're mechanically inclined, you can cut a seal right here. Should seal it. If not, and you just need a quick fix, Sonax also makes this valve with a seal around it. It's very available, and you can get it in late and early. Late I would consider 2005, 2006 and up. Early I would consider 04 and prior. That being said, the reason why that valve fails is because it also sees a lot of stroking and it sands the bore down. The orifice that feeds, usually it doesn't sand the bore down that badly, especially if you have a lot of miles in a unit. The orifice that feeds this is extremely tiny. It's smaller than a 16th. It's not a lot of fluid to stroke it. So that's why having a seal really helps. And it's a good preventative thing to do, along with making sure that orifice is sealed up. So, in short, guys, I hope this really helps you diagnose lockup. You know, it works off of grounds, once again, not positives like most people think. off is positive, ground is on. And it looks a little scary, but honestly, it's very small, very simple. It's just not a lot of fluid feeds it, and we do expect a lot out of it. See my other video for lockup explained, because it gets a little more technical in how it works. Otherwise, join us next time for our next diagnostic tip. Thank you.